What would you do if a wild mother carried her dying cub across miles of burning savanna not to escape, but to find something no one believed she understood? Under the ruthless African sun, a single moment can change everything. When a venomous strike leaves a baby lion fading with every breath, his mother makes a decision that defies instinct, danger, and everything the wild has ever taught her. She doesn't turn back. She doesn't hide. She keeps moving, as if she knows exactly where hope might still exist. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And what she does when she finally stops will leave even the most hardened hearts questioning what animals are truly capable of. So listen closely as this incredible journey unfolds. Under the brutal midday sun, the savannah seemed suspended in a silence too thin to trust. Heat poured from a cloudless sky in hard, relentless sheets, bleaching the grasslands in gold and pale dust, until the horizon itself looked brittle enough to crack. The wind came in slow, scorching breaths, sliding over the open land and setting the tall grass trembling in long, shimmering waves. Now and then, a dry stalk clicked against another. Far off, a few insects rasped in the heat, their thin, uneven chorus swallowed almost at once by the enormity of the plain. It was the kind of stillness that often came just before something changed, though nothing in that moment announced danger clearly enough to be named. Nala moved through the grass with the steady caution of a mother who had learned to read the land by instinct. Her tawny body cut a narrow path through the sunburned stems, every muscle calm but alert, her ears flicking at distant sounds, too faint for anything but survival to register. A few paces behind her came Keto, still young enough to let curiosity outrun caution. His small paws pressed lightly into the hot earth, his round eyes wandering everywhere at once. Everything around him seemed worthy of wonder. The glint of light on a beetle shell, the flutter of seed heads in the breeze, the quick silver shift of something moving where the grass thickened into shadow. He paused often, nose lifted, listening and looking with the reckless fascination of the very young. Each tiny motion in the brush pulled at his attention. A rustle, a bend in the grass, a flicker almost too small to see. Nala stayed ahead, not far, but far enough that the space between them could suddenly matter. She did not look back at once. There was no reason to, not yet. In the wild, disaster often needed no more than a single careless second and a distance that seemed harmless until it wasn't. Keto drifted closer to a thicker patch of grass, its stems greener at the base, where a little trapped moisture still clung to the roots. Something had moved there. He could not see it clearly, only the suggestion of life sliding low through cover. He leaned forward, one paw lifting slightly, ears pricked, body balanced in innocent concentration. The world held its breath around him. Then the grass exploded. The movement was so fast, it barely looked real. One moment there was only shadow beneath the stalks, and the next, a dark body uncoiled in a violent streak. The snake struck with terrifying precision, its head darting out and back almost in the same instant. There was no warning rattle, no dramatic flare, no time for fear to gather shape. Just impact. Keto jerked backward with a startled cry, stumbling as the pain hit before his mind could understand it. The bite was small, almost invisible, but it landed with the force of a sentence already passed. Nala heard the sound at once, not loud, not desperate, just wrong. Her head snapped around, and everything maternal and ferocious in her ignited at the same time. In a blur of instinct, she lunged back through the grass. A low, explosive growl tore from her chest as she reached Keto. The snake was already pulling away, but Nala's paw came down in a brutal sweep, striking the slender body hard enough to fling it sideways. For a heartbeat, the reptile twisted in the sunlight, scales flashing like wet stone. And then it vanished into the grass with shocking speed, erased as if the earth itself had swallowed it. Nala stood over Keto's sides, heaving once her eyes locked on the place where the snake had disappeared. But there was nothing to fight now. No enemy to pin down beneath her claws, no throat to crush. The attacker was gone, and in its absence the silence rushed back thicker than before. Keto was still standing, but only barely. At first it was subtle. A tremor ran through one foreleg, then another through his shoulders. He blinked hard as if trying to clear something from his sight. His balance wavered. He shifted his paws, missed his footing, and nearly toppled. Nala dropped her head at once, her nose brushing along his side, searching for blood, for torn skin, for anything she could identify and answer. But there was almost nothing to see. No open gash, no obvious wound, only a small mark where the fang had entered and disappeared again. Keto drew a quick, shallow breath, then another. His mouth opened as if to call to her, but what came out was weak and thin, barely more than air shaped into sound. His legs buckled. He tried to steady himself, but his body was no longer fully his. Strength seemed to be draining out of him from the inside, too fast, too quietly. Nala circled once, then again, her movements quick and restless, her nose returning again and again to the bite. She licked the wound. Then she stopped. She lowered her head and inhaled more deeply, and something in her changed. There was a smell there, faint, bitter wrong. It clung to the skin around the puncture, unfamiliar and dangerous, in a way raw blood was not. Her body tensed all at once. The fur along her spine lifted. Keto's eyes had already lost some of their brightness. His head sagged lower. His breathing shortened further, each inhale smaller than the one before it. Nala nudged him. No response. She nudged him harder, her muzzle pushing gently against his chest, then under his jaw, trying to bring his head up. Keto swayed, then collapsed to his knees. He did not cry out this time. His body was going soft, slipping beyond the reach of fear, beyond even the immediate shock of pain. The threat was no longer outside them in the grass. It was already moving through him, silent and irreversible, unless something changed. Nala paced a tight circle around him. Her tail lashed once, then again. She looked toward the grass where the snake had vanished, but what could she do? Chase it, kill it? There was no answer there. The enemy had left its weapon behind, inside her cub. There was nothing to face, nowhere to strike, and that helplessness was more frightening than any visible predator. She returned to Keto and licked at the wound again, then at his face, then pressed her nose against his small ribs, counting life by the shallow lift and fall. Time had become the hunter now. The wind moved over the savannah in another dry wave, hot and useless. It brought her no scent of a water, no sign of nearby safety, no immediate promise of help. All around her stretched the same pitiless expanse of grass and heat and distance. Nala stood still at last, staring out over it. Instinct pulled her in opposite directions. One urge told her to stay, to guard him where he had fallen, to keep him near familiar ground. Another, older and sharper than thought, told her that staying meant losing him. She had only seconds to choose, but those seconds dragged and widened until they felt unbearable. Keto's breathing weakened again. His head dipped so low his chin nearly touched the ground. That decided it. Nala bent down, and with a care that seemed impossibly gentle for a body built for power, she lifted him into her jaws. She adjusted her grip so his weight would rest as securely as possible, so his neck would not twist, so his body would not jolt too much against her movement. Then she rose. She did not look back at the patch of grass where the snake had struck. There was nothing left there for her now. She started walking. The first steps were measured, deliberate, almost solemn. But once she committed to the direction, they grew firmer, faster, more certain. This was not blind panic. She was not fleeing in circles nor searching aimlessly for shade. She moved as though some invisible line had fixed itself before her, and she meant to follow it to the end. Across the open savanna, she held to a single course. She ignored the familiar paths that would have led back toward safer cover. She passed a shallow hollow where she might have hidden through the hottest part of the day. She did not angle toward nearby trees. She did not return to old territory. Again and again, she lifted her head slightly, testing the wind. And every time she lowered it, she kept going in the same direction. There was purpose in it, fragile, improbable, but unmistakable. Somewhere in the back of instinct, almost too faint to call memory, something had risen. Not long before, from a distance, Nala had once seen humans gather around another wounded creature near the edge of the land, where grass gave way to dust and noise. She had watched from concealment, suspicious and still. The animal had been lifted, carried, taken away, but not hunted, not torn apart, not devoured. The memory was incomplete, little more than flashes, human voices, strange smells, urgency without bloodlust. It should have meant nothing. Yet now, with Keto growing colder and weaker in her mouth, that blurred image sharpened into the only direction that felt different from despair. So she followed it. The sun climbed higher, if that was possible, and the heat became almost solid. The earth burned beneath her paws. Every step sent dust upward in soft, dry bursts. There was nowhere to rest that did not cost time, and time was something the venom was stealing faster than distance could repay. Nala kept moving. Sweat darkened the fur along her muzzle and chest. Her breathing deepened heavier now under the combined weight of exhaustion and fear. But she did not stop. Keto hung limp between her jaws. At intervals, she adjusted her hold on him, trying to keep him steady, trying to feel some sign of resistance, some small movement that said he was still fighting. There was almost nothing. His body had gone frighteningly slack. Once, a paw twitched faintly against her chest, but whether it was will or the poison tightening through him, she could not tell. His breathing had become so slight that each breath seemed like it might be the last one she would feel. The savannah stretched endlessly ahead. Sunlight shimmered on the horizon in wavering bands, making distant trees seem to float. Grasshoppers jumped out of her path and vanished again. A vulture circled high overhead, patient and detached. Nala walked on each step, more urgent than the last. The poison kept working. Keto's head sagged lower with every mile. The rhythm of Nala's gait made his small body sway gently, but he did not stir. His ears no longer flicked at the wind. His eyes stayed half-lidded, empty of the bright curiosity that had led him into the grass only what felt like moments ago. Whatever was moving inside him was relentless, quiet, and far faster than any predator she could outrun. Nala pressed forward through the burning light as if force alone could hold him in the world. There was no turning back now. Not to the place of the bite, not to the territory she knew, not to the version of the day that had existed before the strike. The only thing left was motion, ahead, always ahead. And so, beneath a sun that showed no mercy, the mother lion crossed the savannah, carrying more than her cub. She carried a vanishing heartbeat, a memory she barely understood, and the last impossible hope that somewhere beyond the heat and distance, something stronger than venom might still be waiting. Will Keto get a miracle? Or will he take his final breaths in his mother's arms? Tell us what you think in the comments. Your guess might surprise you. And don't forget to subscribe before we dive into the most powerful part of the story. As Nala pressed deeper into the blazing savannah, the land around her began to feel different. Nothing changed all at once. The sky remained hard and bright. The grass still swayed in dry, whispering waves beneath the hot wind. But the silence no longer belonged only to heat and distance. Something else had entered it. The rustling in the grass behind her lost its randomness. It came too often now, too measured, too deliberate. Once, then again, then, from a slightly different angle. A faint movement appeared at the edge of her vision and vanished before she could turn fully toward it. Then another. Far off to her left, a pair of pale eyes flashed between the stems and disappeared. She did not stop walking, but every part of her body changed. Her ears lifted higher, her shoulders tightened, her stride shifted from weary persistence to controlled alertness. She kept Keto secure in her jaws and continued forward, yet her attention widened, stretching outward in every direction at once. She knew this feeling. She knew the difference between a land that watched and a land that hunted. The hyenas had found her. They were still at a distance, scattered at first, moving carefully through the grass as though they were merely curious. None rushed forward. None made the mistake of testing a lioness head-on too early. They kept a safe perimeter and watched her with patient calculation. One drifted along her right. Another crossed farther behind. A third remained nearly still, except for the gleam of its eyes. They did not challenge her strength directly. They studied it, measured it, waited for it to fail. Nala kept going. She had no time for displays, no strength to waste on warning charges. Every step had to serve Keto now. But the pressure behind her thickened. More shapes joined the first few. What had been scattered movement became a pattern. The sounds in the grass multiplied until they formed a rough rhythm, a loose pulse trailing her across the plain. When she glanced back, the shapes were nearer. When she looked again moments later, they were nearer still. Keto gave her nothing. No shift in his limbs, no weak sound, no sign that he felt the motion of her body or the tension rising around them. He seemed heavier now, though, not because his body had changed. It was the deadening softness of him, and the way he no longer held himself at all, that made carrying him feel like holding on to something slipping away. Nala tightened her grip, careful not to hurt him, careful not to let him fall. Her jaw ached. Her shoulders burned. Still she walked. She altered her path slightly to avoid denser patches of grass where the hyenas might close in unseen. Yet with every adjustment they adapted too. They never rushed. They only narrowed the space around her by degrees, using patience as a weapon. The open land that had seemed so vast now began to feel crowded with unseen intent. Ahead, the terrain broke suddenly into a wide stretch of exposed ground, a bare sweep of cracked earth and short flattened grass, too open for ambush and too empty for cover. Nala slowed for the briefest instant. Behind her, the hyenas continued to gather. To the sides, their movement thickened. There was no safe route left. Staying in thicker cover would let them press closer. Turning back would cost time she no longer possessed. Hiding was impossible. Resting was unthinkable. So she chose speed over shelter. Without warning, Nala surged forward and ran straight into the open. Dust burst beneath her paws. The heat rising from the bare earth hit like a second sun. But she did not hesitate. She ran hard and low, Keto's limp body held carefully but firmly, her muscles forced past exhaustion by sheer need. In the open, she was completely exposed. There was nowhere to disappear, nowhere to pause, nowhere to defend from partial cover. The hyenas recognized opportunity at once. They broke into motion behind her, spreading out with renewed urgency. The distance between hunter and hunted shrank quickly. They no longer followed in a lazy arc. Now they moved with purpose. Some stayed behind her, driving the pace. Others angled outward and then inward, trying to flank her, trying to force her into a narrower channel, trying to test whether fatigue had finally made her careless. Their paws struck the hard ground in fast, dry beats. Their panting rose through the air. Nala could feel them drawing level along the edges of her path, not yet attacking but no longer content, simply to wait. Still, she did not break course. The sun fell lower. Shadows lengthened across the savannah in dark bars. The gold of afternoon turned bruised and muted. Heat remained, but light began to thin. In daylight, the open land had offered at least visibility. As dusk deepened, the balance shifted. The hyenas grew bolder. The world belonged more easily to them in half-light and darkness, where confusion favored numbers and patience turned into menace. By the time evening settled fully, the savannah had changed into a place of silhouettes and glinting eyes. The horizon darkened. The grasses became black ripples against a fading sky. The hyenas' calls began at last, those eerie rising bursts of sound that were never laughter, no matter how humans named them. Sharp yips, harsh shrieks, thin, cracked notes that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Keto was barely breathing. His head hung low with every step Nala took. His body had become completely loose, every line of resistance gone. If not for the faintest whisper of warmth and the occasional tremor at his ribs, he might already have seemed lifeless. Nala felt panic pressing harder against her chest than exhaustion ever could. She slowed for 2 steps, then forced herself onward. The poison was winning. The darkness was helping it. The hyenas knew it too. Soon they were no longer content to shadow her from behind. They moved closer, visibly now, one shape here, another there, all circling inward. What had been a loose pursuit hardened into a ring. A few drifted close enough for her to see the pale shine of their teeth when they opened their mouths. Another darted in, and then back out, testing her reaction. Their confidence grew with every sign of weakness they read from her slowing body. At last, Nala stopped. There was no path forward through a tightening circle. No room left to keep walking and protect Keto at the same time. She lowered her head carefully and laid him on the ground. Even now, even surrounded, she adjusted him with the utmost care, nudging his body until he lay as steadily as possible on the earth. The night seemed to hold itself still around them. The hyenas slowed too, sensing the shift, sensing that the long chase had reached its breaking point. Nala turned to face them. She planted her paws and drew herself up, every muscle taut despite the fatigue shaking through her frame. Then she roared. The sound ripped across the dark savannah and carried far into the night. For an instant, the hyenas hesitated. The old truth was still there in that roar. She was a lioness, and a single blow from her could crush bone. But hesitation was not retreat. They did not break and run. They only widened for a moment, then resumed their circling tighter and tighter, waiting for the instant when her strength would no longer match the threat in her voice. Nala did not lunge. She did not waste herself on a reckless charge. She held the ground between them and Keto, turning with their movement, keeping them at distance by sheer posture and will. They moved. She moved. Their circle narrowed. Her breathing grew louder. The earth beneath her paws felt unstable, not because it shifted, but because everything depended on what she did next. Then in a move, none of them seemed to expect, Nala broke the standoff by doing the opposite of attack. She stared straight at the nearest hyenas for one long second. Then she turned and ran. The suddenness of it shattered the balance of the moment. The hyenas reacted instantly, exactly as she needed them to. Every eye, every body, every predatory instinct snapped toward the moving target. They lunged after her in a wave of dark shapes, abandoning the patch of ground where Keto lay motionless. Nala ran as though she still had full strength, though pain flared through every muscle and her lungs burned with each breath. She no longer carried Keto. That made her faster, but the freedom felt like agony. Every step away from him tore against instinct. Yet she did not falter. She had made a choice, and now she had to make it work. She led them deeper into the dark. Across broken earth and through waist-high grass, she drew them farther and farther from the place where she had left her cub. Behind her came the hyenas, focused completely on the fleeing lioness. Some called to the others as they ran. Some tried to flank again, but speed and darkness made the chase chaotic. Nala used that chaos. She zigzagged just enough to keep them committed, just enough to hold their attention, just enough to put distance between them and Quito. By the time she judged it enough, her body felt close to collapse. She slowed, gradually slipping behind a patch of thicker brush and curving away. The hyenas overshot for a moment in their momentum. She used that moment to vanish from their direct line, then turned and began moving back the way she had come. This time she made no sound. No heavy stride, no charge. Only the softest possible placement of exhausted paws over tired ground. She traveled with the silence of something that had already given everything and was now moving on necessity alone. When she finally reached the place where she had left Quito, her heart pounded so hard she could feel it through her limbs. He was still there. Still small. Still still. Still frighteningly quiet. Nala rushed to him and lowered her head, touching his side, his face the base of his throat. For one terrible instant she thought she felt nothing. Then very faintly there it was, a shallow breath so weak she almost mistook it for wind. Relief did not come. There was no room for relief. Only the knowledge that he had not yet slipped beyond reach and that every second still mattered. The eastern horizon paled. Slowly the first gray of dawn loosened the grip of night. The shapes of the land returned. Grass regained edges. The sky grew lighter than silver. Nala took Quito up again more carefully than ever, because now her own fatigue made every movement less precise. Her steps had lost their earlier force. Each one landed heavily. Her muscles trembled. Her mouth was dry, her throat burning from heat and exertion and the roar she had given to the dark. But she held to the same direction as before. She did not stop. When full morning finally arrived, it brought not rest, but a new kind of exposure. The savannah brightened around her, and ahead through a thinning band of grass, something cut across the land in a line too straight to belong there. A dirt road. Red and flat and marked by wheels, it ran like a scar through the wild. To Nala, it meant what few things did any more humans. She moved toward it at once. Quito hung limp between her jaws. Dust rose beneath her paws as she stepped close to the roadside. Then from somewhere beyond the bend came a sound that did not belong to wind or animal and engine. A vehicle appeared. It came fast, rattling over the road, sunlight flashing off metal. Nala stood close enough to see the shape through the windshield, close enough that the noise shook through her tired body. For one impossible heartbeat, it seemed the world might change right there. The machine would slow. The human inside would see. The long journey would finally arrive at meaning. But the vehicle never stopped. It did not even hesitate. It passed in a rush of speed and noise and dust, the driver either not seeing her at all or seeing and choosing distance over danger. The red cloud it left behind rolled over Nala and Quito alike, stinging her eyes and coating his fur. In another second, it was gone, shrinking along the road, until only the sound remained, then not even that. Nala stood motionless at the edge of the road, staring after it. No call came back. No second vehicle followed. No sign of help remained, except the settling dust. Slowly, she stepped away from the roadside. The silence that returned was worse now, because it had been interrupted by hope. She lowered Quito to the ground and nudged him gently with her muzzle. No response. She pushed again a little more insistently, trying to rouse him to provoke any reflex at all. Nothing. Quito lay completely still, his body so limp it seemed boneless. Nala touched his chest, his face the wound that had started all of this. Still nothing changed. At last, her own strength gave way. Her shoulders sagged, her legs folded slightly. She sank down beside him for a few seconds, not in rest, but in collapse. Her breathing came rough and uneven now, each inhale drawn through exhaustion so deep it bordered on emptiness. The road had failed her. The memory that had carried her forward felt thin and foolish for a moment. Around her, the vast savannah remained indifferent, bright and endless and mercilessly calm. Then the wind shifted. It came softer now, carrying something different. Not dry grass, not dust, not the scent of predators. Water, coolness, damp earth, life. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, the trace of humans' wood smoke, old structures, lingering signs of a place where the wild had been interrupted by shelter. Nala's head lifted. Her ears rose again. The dullness in her eyes sharpened. She stayed still only long enough to be sure. The scent came once more, riding the breeze in a narrow stream, as if pointing. It was not close, but it was real. Somewhere ahead, beyond the road, there was water. And where there was water, and the smell of people there might still be the last thing she had come this far to find. Nala stood. The motion was slow, almost painful, and for a moment it seemed she might sink again. But she steadied herself. She lifted Quito once more, adjusting him carefully, protecting his slack body from jarring movement. Then she turned away from the road that had ignored her and faced the direction of the scent. She did not look back. Her pace was slower now, stripped of everything except intention, yet each step was decisive. No more hesitation, no more testing of options. The road had offered one answer and failed. The wind had offered another. She trusted that instead. So she left the empty road behind and walked toward the smell of water, toward the fading traces of human presence, toward whatever waited at the end of a journey that had already demanded more of her than the wild should ever ask of a mother. The scent carried on, the wind grew stronger with every step Nala took. It no longer came in faint, uncertain traces, but in a steady current that pulled her forward through the thinning grass. The land itself began to change. The brittle dryness that had defined the savannah softened. The ground beneath her paws held a slight give, as if moisture had seeped into it from somewhere close. The air cooled by the smallest degree, enough to be felt against her overheated body. Ahead, through a sparse line of trees, something unfamiliar took shape. A small wooden house stood near the river's edge. It did not belong to the wild in the way everything else did. Its straight lines and stillness cut against the endless motion of grass and wind. The roof sagged slightly with age, the walls weathered and worn, but it stood firm in a clearing that seemed almost deliberately carved out of the land. There were no high fences, no loud machines, no immediate signs of danger. Only the quiet presence of humans close enough now to feel real. Nala stopped. For a moment she simply stood there, Quito hanging limp in her jaws, her body trembling under exhaustion. The journey that had carried her across miles of burning earth had led her here to this place she barely understood. Her eyes fixed on the house, as if it were the last edge of something unseen, a boundary between what she could do and what she could no longer control. Quito did not move. His body had grown frighteningly still, his breath so shallow it seemed to vanish between one moment and the next. If there was any time left, it was measured in seconds now, not distance. Then movement broke the stillness. From around the house, several dogs emerged. They came forward quickly, at first drawn by scent and sound, then slowed as they saw what approached them. Their bodies stiffened, their ears alert, their steps cautious. They spread slightly, forming a loose line between the house and the open ground. Not attacking, not retreating, watching. They smelled the wild on her. They saw the predator in her shape. But they also saw something else. Nala did not change her pace. She did not lower her head in threat or bare her teeth. She did not charge. She did not turn away. She walked forward slowly each step, heavy with exhaustion, but steady with purpose. The dogs moved alongside her now, keeping a careful distance, circling just enough to understand, but not enough to provoke. No barking broke the moment. No sudden aggression snapped the fragile balance. Their curiosity held them in place where instinct might have driven them away or forward. For the first time since the snake's strike, Nala passed another presence without conflict. She moved past them and toward the house. The small yard offered no protection, no shadows to disappear into, no cover to retreat behind. It was an open space where everything could be seen clearly, where any wrong move would be immediate and final. But Nala no longer had space for caution. She crossed the yard with slow, deliberate steps, her strength fading with each one. Her focus never left the door. When she reached the wooden steps, she stopped again. She stood there directly before the closed entrance, the stillness around her growing so complete that even the wind seemed to pause. The dogs had stopped as well, forming a silent ring behind her, as if they too sensed the gravity of what was about to happen. Nala did nothing at first. She did not scratch the door. She did not roar. She did not call out in any way the wild would recognize. She simply stood holding her dying cub and waited. The silence deepened until it became unbearable. Then slowly she lowered her head. Carefully, so carefully it seemed impossible for something so powerful. She placed Keto down on the wooden threshold. She adjusted him with her muzzle, shifting his small body so it lay as gently as possible. His head turned slightly to the side, his chest barely rising. He did not resist. He did not react. When she had done all she could, Nala stepped back. One step, then another. She did not run. She did not guard him from above. Instead, she lowered herself to the ground, folding her legs beneath her body, her chest pressed to the earth. Her head remained lifted, her eyes fixed on Keto, her ears alert, but her body still. It was not the posture of a hunter. It was not the stance of an animal preparing to defend. It was something else entirely. A surrender. Not to fear, but to the limits of what she could do alone. In that moment, the wild and everything it demanded fell away, leaving only a single fragile act of trust where none should have existed. From inside the house, a faint sound stirred. Footsteps. The latch shifted. The door opened. Amina stepped out onto the threshold, her expression shaped first by routine responding to the unusual quiet of her dogs, and then instantly broken by what she saw. She froze. A lioness lay in her yard. At her feet, a cub lay unmoving. The dogs stood silent, unmoving, as if the entire world had paused around the scene. Amina did not speak. She could not. Shock passed quickly through her features, replaced by something sharper, fear, yes, but also confusion, urgency, disbelief. Her eyes moved between the lioness and the cub, trying to understand the impossible arrangement before her. Nala did not move. She did not growl. She did not even shift her weight. She only looked. Her gaze held no immediate threat, no rising aggression, only a thin, stretched tension balanced between hope and the last threads of her strength. Then, with a movement so small it could have been missed, she nudged Keto forward. Just slightly. Enough. Amina saw it. Her breath caught. For a moment, she did not move. as if even the act of stepping forward might shatter whatever fragile understanding had formed between them. But then something in her changed. Slowly, carefully, she stepped down from the threshold. Each step was measured, each movement deliberate. She kept her eyes on Nala, watching for any sign that the moment might turn. But none came. The lioness remained still, watching, waiting. The distance between them closed. Amina lowered herself to her knees beside Quito. Her hand hovered above him for a brief second, suspended between instinct and fear. Then gently she placed it against his small body. Cold, too still, but not gone. She pressed lightly against his chest and felt it a faint, irregular beat, so weak it seemed impossible it could last much longer. Everything changed in her face. There was no more hesitation, only urgency. She gathered Quito into her arms, lifting him carefully, supporting his head and body, as though he might break if handled too roughly. He gave no resistance. His weight settled into her hands, without life. Nala did not react. She did not rise. She did not follow. She only watched. Her eyes tracked every movement, every shift, every breath, as her cub was lifted away from her. There was no anger in that gaze. Only something raw and exposed, stretched to its absolute limit. Amina turned and ran inside. Her voice broke the silence at last. "Help! We need help now!" Others responded immediately. Doors opened. Footsteps rushed. Questions were asked and answered in fragments. The urgency spread through the small house in seconds. Outside, the vehicle was brought around. The back door flung open. Quito was placed inside on a hastily gathered blanket. Amina glanced once more at Nala. The lioness remained where she was, unmoving, as if every last part of her strength had been poured into the single act of bringing her cub to that door. Then the engine roared to life. The vehicle sped away, leaving the house, the dogs, and the lioness behind, in a swirl of dust and fading light. The journey was not over yet. Inside the rescue station, everything moved at once. Quito was carried in and placed on a table beneath harsh white lights. Hands moved quickly, efficiently. Oxygen was brought in. A mask was fitted. Instruments were prepared. Needles, tubing, fluids, all arranged in seconds. "Heart's weak," one voice said. "Get the antivenom ready," another answered. No one wasted time on disbelief. There was only action. Quito's body was small against the metal surface, fragile under the intensity of the work being done. His chest barely moved beneath the oxygen mask. His heart flickered faintly on the monitor, each beat uncertain, irregular. "Stay with us. Come on, little one." Outside, the story shifted again. Nala had followed as far as she could, and then, with nothing left to hold her upright, she collapsed. Her body sank onto the ground near the entrance, her chest rising and falling in heavy, uneven breaths. Dust clung to her fur. Her muscles, driven beyond their limits, released all at once. A staff member noticed her and froze. "There's a lion out here, she's down," and the message carried inside quickly. Now there were 2 lives hanging in the balance. For a brief second, the room hesitated. Then the decision was made. We save both. Orders split the team. One group remained with Quito, maintaining the fragile line, keeping him alive. Another moved outside, bringing water equipment and careful restraint. Inside, time stretched thin. Quito's breathing faltered, then steadied slightly. The monitor shifted. Small changes. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to continue. Outside, Nala lay still. The silence around her deepened again. But this time it was filled with watchful tension. Her sides rose and fell slower, now heavier. Her eyes remained closed. Minutes passed. Inside, a voice broke softly. "He's responding." A small lift in Quito's chest. A slightly stronger beat. Hope. Outside, nothing. The stillness grew. Then a twitch, barely visible a movement in Nala's shoulder. Someone leaned closer. "Wait." She moved. Another breath deeper than before. Her ear flicked, her eyelids trembled. Then slowly, painfully, they opened. Nala looked up. Not fully strong, not fully aware, but alive. No one cheered. The relief was too quiet for that. Inside, Keto's breathing strengthened further. Outside, Nala began to move. She pushed herself up slowly, every motion heavy with exhaustion. For a moment, she swayed unsteady. Then she found her balance. She turned her head, her gaze fixed on the building where her cub lay. She did not move closer. She did not try to reclaim him. She only watched. For a long moment, she stood there, holding that distance, understanding something that needed no words. Keto was alive, and he was no longer hers to carry. Nala turned away. Step by step, she walked back toward the open savanna. She did not look back again. Her figure grew smaller against the wide, endless land until it disappeared completely into the grass and light. Inside the rescue station, Keto remained, breathing, fighting, alive. And though the savanna stretched on unchanged beyond the walls, something within it had shifted forever because one mother had crossed it, not to survive, but to trust. In the days that followed, the rescue station settled into a new rhythm, one measured not by clocks, but by Keto's breathing. At first, survival was still uncertain. Though the venom had been slowed and pushed back, its shadow lingered in his small body. He remained weak, too weak to stand, too weak even to lift his head for long. The staff rotated through long hours beside him, checking his pulse, adjusting fluids, keeping oxygen close, warming him when the nights turned cool, and watching for every tiny change that might mean life was choosing to stay. His chest rose more evenly now, but only just. Sometimes his breathing would deepen enough to give them hope. Sometimes it would falter again and pull everyone back into silence. "Easy, little one," Amina would whisper when she changed his blankets or cleaned the fur around his mouth. "You've already come too far to stop now." Keto never fought them, but he never leaned into them either. He accepted help because he had no strength left to refuse it. There was a quiet distance in him, even while he hovered between weakness and recovery, as if some part of him remained turned toward something beyond the walls of the station. Several days after the rescue, that distance began to show more clearly. It started with a twitch in one paw, then a blink that lasted longer, more aware than before. Then one pale morning, Keto opened his eyes fully, for the first time since the bite. The room around him was washed in soft light. Metal cloth, glass movement. He stared without panic, but not with trust either. His gaze moved slowly from one shape to another, resting longest, not on the humans near him, but on the open doorway, where sunlight spilled across the floor. "He's tracking," one of the workers said softly. Amina leaned closer, careful not to startle him. "Keto." His ears flicked. That was all. But it was enough to make hope feel solid. Over the next few days, his strength returned in fragments. He learned again how to hold his head up. He reacted to sounds with more clarity. A dropped metal tray made him start, but the cry of birds outside drew a different response, sharper, deeper, instinctive. He would go still at the sound of wind moving through the grass. He would turn his face toward the scent of rain before the humans sensed it themselves. When evening came, and the air shifted cooler from the open savanna, Keto always noticed. He was healing. But he was not becoming tame. That more than anything made the staff watch him differently. Keto did not seek hands, did not nuzzle for comfort, did not attach himself to the voices that fed and treated him. He tolerated their presence. He allowed care. But he remained unmistakably separate. Even lying weak on a blanket, he carried the stillness of something wild. He would often lie with his eyes on the far edge of the horizon, beyond the fence line, beyond the vehicles, beyond the station itself. It was as if he were listening for something none of them could hear. Amina noticed it first, though then the others began to mention it too. "He always looks out there," Jabari said one afternoon, watching Quito ignore a bowl of food for a moment, just to lift his head toward the wind. "Like he's waiting." "Maybe he remembers," Amina said. "Remembers what she looked toward the open land." Who brought him here? That question lingered in the station longer than anyone admitted. At night, when the work quieted and the lights dimmed, the story of Nala returned in whispers. The way she had crossed the yard without attacking. The way she had laid Quito down and stepped back. The way she had not tried to take him when the humans lifted him away. None of it fit easily into what they knew or thought they knew about instinct and fear and the boundaries between wild animals and people. "Why come to us?" one worker asked over a late cup of tea. "Because she had no choice," another said. Amina shook her head. "No, there is always some other direction to run." But she didn't run. She chose. They all knew she was right. That was what unsettled them most. Nala had not simply stumbled into human territory in desperation. She had carried her cub across the savannah and come to the door. It was not panic alone. It was purpose. A week after Quito first opened his eyes, the answer, or part of it, came back to them. The night was calm. No storm threatened. No alarms sounded from the enclosures. The dogs near the station were quiet, curled in their usual places, ears twitching now and then at harmless sounds. A thin wind moved through the grass, carrying the dry, whispering hush of the savannah under a clear sky. Inside, most of the station had settled into the softer pace that comes after midnight. Quito had been resting. Then suddenly he lifted his head. Not lazily, not in reaction to a nearby sound, but sharply, instantly, his whole body tightening with a recognition that ran deeper than thought. His ears rose, his shoulders tensed. He stared toward the far edge of the station grounds, where darkness met the reach of the outer lights. Amina, who had been writing notes nearby, looked up at once. "What is it?" Quito made a low, strained sound in his throat. It was weak but urgent. He tried to push himself upright too quickly and nearly stumbled. She moved toward him, then stopped when she saw that he was not afraid. He was focused. He was looking at someone. Jabari came to the doorway and followed Quito's line of sight. There, just beyond the wash of artificial light, stood a figure. Still, silent, half shadow, half memory. A lioness. No one needed to say her name. Nala had returned. She did not come closer. She did not step into the brightness. She stood at the border between the rescue station and the open savannah, her body leaner now, still marked by hardship, but upright and unmistakable. The wind stirred the fur along her shoulders. Her eyes, reflecting the faint light, never left Quito. Inside the station, everything changed in an instant. One worker reached automatically for the radio but did not speak into it. Another froze halfway across the room. The dogs outside lifted their heads and watched but did not bark. "No one moved too fast," Amina said quietly. There was no sign of aggression from Nala. No stalking posture, no lowered head, no tightening for attack. She was not hunting. She was not reclaiming territory. She was only there. Quito tried to stand. His legs still trembled from weakness, but he pushed against them anyway. A small sound escaped him, thin, rough, almost broken with effort. He faced her fully now, every part of his body drawn toward her, as though some invisible thread had just been pulled taut again. That's his mother, Jabari whispered, though no one needed confirmation. The silence between them was unlike any silence the station had known before. It was not empty. It was full of distance memory. Hunger, pain, survival, all of it condensed into one impossible moment where neither moved forward. Nala remained exactly where she was. She did not rush to him. She did not call. She only watched. And in that long gaze, the humans began to understand. "She's not here to take him," Amina said at last, her voice almost too soft to hear. "She came to see whether he had lived, to see whether the things she had trusted the unknown with had been returned in the only form that mattered." Keto took one unsteady step, then another, but he was too weak to go farther. His legs buckled, and he sank down, still facing her. He made that small sound again, not a cry of panic, but something rawer, older. Something that belonged only to the bond between them. Nala did not move. Maybe she understood his weakness. Maybe she had known before she came that he would not be able to return to her yet, if ever. Maybe she had only needed to see his eyes open to know that the impossible choice she had made at the threshold of a human house had not ended in emptiness. The distance held. Between them lay everything the story had become: the venom, the miles, the dogs, the house, the station, the hands that had saved him, the wild that still called him. Neither mother nor cub crossed it. At last, Nala lowered her head slightly. It was not submission, not fear, only acknowledgement. Keto, trembling where he lay, stopped struggling to rise. His breathing steadied. His eyes remained locked on hers. Then, as quietly as she had appeared, Nala turned. No one called out. No one followed. They watched as her body shifted fully back toward darkness. She walked away without hurry, without looking back. Within seconds, the shadows folded around her. The edge of the light lost her shape. The grass swallowed what remained. And this time, something in the station told them she would not return again. After she disappeared, Keto remained still for a long time. He did not keep trying to stand. He did not cry out. He simply lay there, eyes on the place where she had vanished, as if some final understanding had settled into him. Something beyond instinct, beyond injury, beyond the fragile miracle that had kept him alive. Amina knelt beside him, but did not touch him right away. "He knows," she murmured. No one answered because there was nothing to add. From that night on, Keto changed in ways both subtle and undeniable. Weeks passed, then months. Strength returned fully to his limbs. His chest broadened, his step steadied. He could run now, first in uncertain bursts, then with the effortless elasticity of something born for open land. His coat thickened, his eyes sharpened. The sickly stillness that had once clung to him was replaced by restless energy and growing power. Yet, even as he recovered, the essential distance remained. Keto never became like an animal raised among humans. He did not seek affection. He did not linger for praise. He accepted food and care with composure, but never with dependence. If someone approached too familiarly, he would step aside, not aggressively, just clearly. He lived near them, but never belonged to them. What he belonged to announced itself in small ways at first. He would stop in the middle of eating and turn toward the wind. He would pace near the boundary fence at dusk, watching the horizon fade. He responded to scents from the savannah, faster than any of the other animals under care. Rain herd movement, distant predators, dry earth, after heat, his body read them all before the humans even noticed the change in air. "He's not staying," Jabari said one morning as Keto stood facing the open land, unmoving for several minutes. Amina nodded. He was never meant to. The station adjusted. Human contact was reduced. Space was widened. The routines of care shifted from rescue to preparation. Keto needed strength awareness instinct and distance from dependence. They began to treat every day, not as if they were keeping him, but as if they were slowly giving him back. When the time came, no one announced it with ceremony. It was simply the right day. The weather held clear. The savannah stretched outward in gold and muted green, endless and waiting. The gate to the release corridor stood open, framing the line between the rescue station and everything beyond it. Keto stood there tall now, no longer the limp cub who had arrived at death's edge in his mother's jaws. Behind him were the people who had pulled him back. Ahead of him was the world he had never stopped listening to. He did not bolt. He did not panic. He stood at the threshold motionless, reading the wind. For a long moment, he did nothing at all. Then he turned his head slightly and looked back. Not at any one face, not with the softness of a pet or the confusion of an animal torn between worlds. It was simply one last look, clear, aware, complete. Acknowledgement, memory, nothing more. Amina swallowed hard. "Go on," she whispered. Keto faced forward again, and then came the smallest surprise of all. He did not choose a random direction. He did not run toward the nearest cover. Instead, after only a heartbeat of stillness, he angled his body and began to walk toward the same line of land Nala had once taken when she carried him across the savannah. The same direction. Jabari noticed first. That way. Amina followed his gaze and said nothing, because there was no need. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps memory lived in ways no one fully understood, in scent, in shape, in the pull of wind, across ground once crossed in desperate love. Whatever guided him, it was not hesitation. Keto walked slowly at first, each step measured almost solemn. Then the distance opened before him. His pace quickened. The stiffness of human-kept paths fell away. His body lengthened into motion that belonged wholly to the wild. He moved through the grass with increasing certainty, no longer looking back, no longer divided. Soon he was running. And then he was gone, absorbed into the wide breathing landscape from which he had nearly been lost forever. No one at the station knew whether he would ever find Nala again. No one knew whether she still moved somewhere beneath that same sky, or whether their lives would cross once more in the immense and indifferent freedom of the savannah. But that was no longer the part of the story that needed answering. Because some journeys are not about rescue alone. They are not about surviving one more night, one more wound, one more impossible distance. Some journeys begin in love so fierce it breaks every rule the wild has written, and they end not in possession, but in return. Keto's life had been carried to the edge of death by venom across the savannah, by his mother, through human hands, by mercy, and back toward the horizon, by something even stronger than memory. And whatever waited for him out there, his true journey had always begun with her. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. See you in the next story.